It is interesting to notice if you like, the mass narrative that we can all get sucked into. And I'm not even talking about the details of the narrative right now in the world. I'm talking about the emotion. You know, it's funny, the Z's talk a lot about the low vibration of say, our media. And they talked about that in Initiation, I think, in one of the channels. And perhaps it was in one of the conversations with the Z's too. But they talk about that low vibration and the low emotional energy there. And I thought about it and I thought, well, that's true. I've always been aware that much of the news that we see in the world, whatever it's about, is often using fear or drama and it's interesting how that kind of infects the way that we think about things. You know, growing up as a British person, I was very aware that one of our cultural patterns was to moan about the weather. You know, the Brits love talking about the weather, and we're not usually talking about the weather in an appreciative way, which, you know, is understandable. But it's interesting that it's like a cultural pattern that we have. Oh, the weather today. Oh, and the thing that always cracks me up in England is, and partly I think because people don't have air conditioning like they do in other countries that are used to the heat. They moan about the cold, they moan about the rain, and then they moan about when it's too hot. So if it's, you know, there's never going to be a happy ground. And I'm bringing this up because what I noticed in myself was when I moved to America 10 years ago now, I enjoyed moaning when I got here. The part of me that missed being in a culture with a little bit of moaning and grumbling, I noticed when I moved here, even though that was something I was kind of like, oh, it'd be nice to be where people are a bit more optimistic. I soon found that little part of me that enjoyed that cultural moaning in silly ways, kind of just as an entertaining thing to do, or just something that I'd culturally got used to. So if we look at that with how our world is and how, you know, just the level of, the vibrational level of some of the stuff that we're seeing flying around lately from the way leaders in the world are speaking, or any of the stuff that you're seeing that just feels very tangled, it can really make you weary and it can wear you out. And I think even if it's something that you're not really conscious of, there is a downtrodden energy to all of it. So I say all of that just because I think, number one, I think we need to acknowledge it's there and know that it's in the room with us, but also to catch the moments when we might also get sucked into it, and that isn't good for us. And that actually, you know, I don't really want to just sit here and commiserate for 25 minutes with my 3 friends about how awful everything is, because that didn't actually make me feel good. I lost some life force. I deadened my vibration. So I think there's a fine balance at the moment, because you often hear of spiritual bypassing. You know, I'm just going to love and light my way through and out of this. And if that works for you and it's working, great. But the truth is, while we're human and while we're in the body, we're here for all of it. We're here for all the waves of it. And actually, even though as a group we have the potential to shift up at the moment in the way that we see things, feel about things, we don't do it by rejecting who we are at a human level or who we've been. We don't do it by rejecting our past. We build on it. So the reason I just want to bring the narrative up is, you might be somebody who is listening to this going, yeah, but Lee, I don't ascribe to any of that. I want to encourage you to use your voice. I want to encourage you to be the person to change the narrative in the conversation. It's something I've been practicing, I mean, for many years in a way, but especially lately with people who have got very much, let's say, into the depression side of everything, which is understandable in some cases, and in other cases it's because that's the way everyone is starting to feel or think about things. This is a really good time to just catch yourself in conversations. How am I responding to what they just said? Am I agreeing? Am I adding? Am I adding fuel to the fire? Am I letting the way they think about this dominate? Or am I offering both of us the possibility of a life raft? Because you can certainly commiserate or empathize with somebody, but there's a big difference between empathizing and diving down into something with somebody and sitting in it with them, or empathizing and understanding where someone is, and then perhaps saying something or offering something that could elevate that person or shift the scenario. And I know for many of you, especially those of you who are really diligently taking care of your vibe right now and making sure that you feel alive and here for the world as much as you can. Doesn't mean that there aren't the days or the moments when we get knocked off balance or we have to process something through our bodies. But for those of you who are those people right now, really, really dig deep into your strength. I did get that 2022 is a year of strength, or at least that was what I was called to deliver to those who will hear my message and incorporate my message as part of the many messages that you're using, learning from, whether it's from people like me who do this for work or whether it's the people in your life. 2022 year of strength. Strength is the way through at the moment, and part of really protecting our strength and nurturing our strength comes from knowing what we need. And for me, as someone who didn't know what he needed for a very long time, and I say this because I think many of you in this community, most are the same. I think as sensitives, as newly awakening sensitives or intuitive people, there were whole sides of us that we had just abandoned. And I'm not saying everybody hasn't done that on the planet to some degree, but those of us who remembered these parts of ourselves and that they were important. You know, for me, it was my late teens where I started my recovery of my sensitivity. It's very important for you to know how you're doing and spot the early warning signs. So for me, one of the things will be when I'm overly stressed. Like if I'm overwhelmed, if I'm at high stress points from all the things coming at me or all the things I'm involved in, I'm now able to catch it, which is great because I wasn't always. I used to burn out, collapse, pull away, go and hide and recover. Nothing wrong with any of that if you're doing that right now, because that's a step. For me, those were steps on the journey to recognizing the warning signals earlier. So for those of you who really are, let's call it energy cheerleaders at the moment, either for the world or for other people or for the family that are depending on you, it's really important that you also look after yourself. I know you've heard me say that a million times if you've been around me for a while. If you're new, you'll hear me say that a lot. But it's really, really important because otherwise you can't be there for the people in your life that you want to be there for. But also, a lot of you right now will be going through a moment where you are recognizing you're having to say no. And you're having to say no to certain people, scenarios, or moments that want your energy. And it might not be comfortable for you to say no. You might be feeling very uncomfortable when you're doing it. But it's two things when you do that. It's self-preservation, which is important, but it's also letting that person who might be either overly or singularly reliant on you recognize that they have other sources. There's a whole world out there. And if they're dependent on you, it's important that they get dependent on themselves. So it doesn't mean they can't look for support, but you know, if you look at the definition of when we're dependent on something or someone, we're getting something that we need or think we need or want from one person or one source. And the truth is, this is not a one person, one source world. There are so many people that we could get the same needs met through. Same with, you know, substance addiction when it's turned dark. You know, when someone is in substance addiction in a desperate way, they're trying to get some level of connection through the thing that they have got addicted to. But they could get connection in so many other ways. And it may be that they've never had the opportunity to know that or to be shown that, or they got pushed into substance addiction because of deep trauma. So this is also why it's good to remember you saying no to a person is not you being master of the universe, because if you see yourself as so important to this other person or this other group or this other activity, and that you're the only person that can do this for them. I mean, sure, if you have a newborn child or if you have a very vulnerable person in your life that you have a bond with, that's a whole other story. But I'm just talking in general at the moment. The needs are high in the world, and that's not going to go away for the next couple of months. So this is a great opportunity for you to look at, where do I say no and where do I say yes? A very good mentor told me about 11 years ago, they said that, and this is probably a common thing out there, but they said, when you say no to something, it leaves you the opportunity to say yes to something else. Great to see you here, and I hope you enjoyed this extract from my monthly energy tune-up. Every single month, I go live to my community, The Portal, and not only give a deep dive reading on the energies that are playing out in the world right now. This is followed by an hour of Q&A where I answer questions on all areas of life, including the energetics and transformation of the planet, and I conclude by channeling my guides, the Z's. This 90-minute broadcast is one of the many offerings inside The Portal, which we see as a sanctuary and a support for sensitives. So if you're curious about trying out The Portal and seeing if it's for you, please visit theportal.world, where you will see the whole host of our offerings. We'd love to have you join us if it resonates. Big love.